Hello and welcome back to the Hasbachan YouTube channel. It is Harry here, and I don't think there's any need for a long introduction to this one really. It does what it says on the tin and on the title, and I'm just jumping on a very popular bandwagon at the moment. So here is who I would put in my personal England squad for the upcoming World Cup. Now, I must stress that at the time of this recording, Southgate hasn't picked a preliminary 55-man squad for the finals, so I'm just going on the overall crop available to England and indeed the manager right now. So without further ado, let's get into it. My three goalkeepers are Jordan Pickford, Nick Pope and Aaron Ramsdale, and I think choosing which goalkeepers to take to the World Cup is pretty straightforward, to be honest. In as much as Dean Henderson is a good goalkeeper and had a fine display against Liverpool recently, I think the three I've chosen are probably set in stone to go to the tournament unless they suffer any major injuries over the coming couple of weeks. Now, if I were the England manager, I would put Nick Pope in ahead of Jordan Pickford as my number one, given his excellent form for Newcastle this season and how reliable he is between the sticks. Yes, the Everton shot stopper has improved over the last year or so and has been fantastic for England over the last 4 years, but in my opinion, Pope is a better goalkeeper when it comes to the fundamentals of keeping, so why not have a safer pair of hands in net? As for Ramsdale, he has come on leaps and bounds since signing for Arsenal and would merit being the number two at the finals. His attitude and demeanour would be such a boost in the dressing room, even if he doesn't make his way onto the pitch, and in my opinion, he is a more all-round and confident goalkeeper than Pickford. Put it this way, I would much rather trust the goalkeeper starring for a team fighting for a Champions League place, who also have the best defensive record in the league, or the number one for a team currently embroiled in a title fight at a tournament like the World Cup. Albeit Everton have only conceded 12 times this season, which is just 2 more than Newcastle and only 1 more than Arsenal. But even with all that being said, Pickford would definitely make my squad as a great person to have around the camp, as well as being someone who Southgate knows he can trust in between the sticks if called upon. If any one of the trio were to suffer an injury, which means that they would miss out on the finals, then Henderson is a more than capable backup. But as I said at the start of this segment, I think those three are not only who I would pick to go to the World Cup, but also who I think Southgate will pick as well. For right backs, I've gone with Kieran Trippier, Kyle Walker and Trent Alexander-Arnold. Now, this does come with a huge asterisk because Kyle Walker is currently fighting to recover from an injury he sustained not that long ago, plus you have Reece James, who is in a similar situation to Walker in that he has had an injury setback of his own at the most inopportune of moments. Provided neither of them can recover in time, then that slot is thrown wide open to someone like James Justin or Kyle Walker-Peters, who could be great shouts given their versatility and ability to cover on either side of the defence. But even if both were to return to full fitness in time, then the wise man would probably only take one of them because of their lack of game time leading up to the finals. And since I think Walker is a better player and would be more pivotal to England's backline than James would, I would take him to Qatar over the Chelsea man. From what I gather, although I could be very wrong with this shout of course, it seems unlikely that James will recover anyway, although neither Walker nor James have ruled themselves out just yet. And for what it's worth, if neither had been injured and were both fully fit, I would have put both of them in at the expense of Trent Alexander-Arnold. I haven't touched on either Kieran Trippier or Trent yet, but it's not really worth elaborating on Trippier for too long. He's in the form of his life at Newcastle, he's been integral to Southgate for a while now, and he's a certainty for the finals. Trent is an altogether different issue because he has been going through a quite high-profile rough patch of form, but then again so have most Liverpool players this season. But just because he is going through a rough phase doesn't mean he's a terrible player all of a sudden, and he will provide a different option from Trippier as a creative spark who could pick apart towering defences, maybe as an impact sub. I do think that perhaps some time out of the spotlight and focusing on making sure he returns to his sparkling best could be beneficial to him, and therefore missing the World Cup might actually be a positive in some respects. But with the aforementioned injury struggles of Walker and James, as well as what he brings to the pitch, he would be on my plane. And for my reserves, I would choose Reece James and Kyle Walker-Peters. My centre-back picks are John Stones, Fikayo Tomori, Benjamin White, Eric Dyer and Mark Gehi. Now, do I think all of these players will go to the finals? No, I don't, to be honest. As much as I would love to see Benjamin White and Fikayo Tomori go to the tournament, Southgate has some players, including the likes of Harry Maguire and Connor Cody, the latter of whom has, in fairness, been in great form for Everton this season, who he will prefer over the two that I've mentioned. However, it's difficult to overlook White at the moment given how well he has been playing for Arsenal, albeit as a makeshift right back, and likewise with Tomori, who has been excellent since making the switch to Italy and was an integral part of a title-winning AC Milan side last season. You will have noticed that I've picked 5 centre-backs in all, and that's because I play 5 at the back formation. I think it suits the team much better and will mean that we are much more solid defensively. I mean, if it was 30 minutes away from working at the Euros, why change it? Therefore, you'd need a plethora of centre-backs to ensure that the team isn't short-changed if 1 or 2 of them get injured during the tournament. Although if Kyle Walker can make it back in time, I assume he'll play as a right-sided centre-back rather than a wing-back. As for the other 3, John Stones is a favourite of Southgate's and a decent defender, even if he hasn't played as many minutes as I'm sure he would have liked to this season, given the fine form of Man City's new arrival Manuel Akanji. I've also been really impressed by Mark Guéhi at Crystal Palace, but then again I really like Crystal Palace at the moment, so maybe that's my own personal bias creeping through. And I think his form warrants a spot in the squad, if only to give him a bit of major tournament experience before he becomes a mainstay in England's back line over the coming years. And if you told me a year ago that I would also include Eric Dyer without a second's hesitation, I wouldn't have believed you, but his renaissance under Antonio Conte at Spurs has allowed him to worm his way back into the England setup, and quite deservedly so. And his ability to play at both centre-back or in midfield should mean he gets a spot. Much like with Trent Alexander-Arnold, perhaps some time away from the media spotlight would be beneficial for Maguire, hence why I haven't picked him in this case for my team, but he would be my reserve choice alongside Cody. My left backs would be Ben Chilwell and Luke Shaw, and in all honesty, there's not much need to ramble on too much about the left back slot. Chilwell and Shaw have both been the main choices in that position for a while, and their ability to slot in equally as proficiently at left wing back, especially Chilwell, means that it's a no-brainer that they will go to Qatar. I do rate Tyrick Mitchell, who I would put as my backup to those two, very highly, and if he can keep up his fine form, there's no reason why he can't challenge the Chelsea and Man United defenders. For now though, I don't see anyone else taking their places. On to the midfielders, and for my central midfield slot, I'm basically going to combine holding, central and attacking midfielders all into one. So my 5 picks would be Declan Rice, Jude Bellingham, James Maddison, Jordan Henderson and Mason Mount. The first 2 players who I mentioned are iron cast inclusions, and I don't think anyone picking an England squad would exclude either of them unless they are injured. Rice has been such a key player for England over the last few years and has only got better and better at West Ham, and he would probably act as the sitter in a 2-man midfield, giving license for Bellingham to push further forward. To think that Bellingham is only 19 yet has so much maturity, experience and ability for a man of his age is actually quite scary, and not only is he England's best central midfielder right now, but he may well become one of the best midfielders of his generation if he continues on developing in the way that he is. The other 3 selections are a little more debatable. You could throw in the likes of Conor Gallagher, James Ward-Prowse, Emile Smith-Rowe and Calvin Phillips, albeit it looks like that the latter will miss the finals through injury anyway, as potential options and or replacements. And if Phillips was fit, I think you can make a compelling case for including him over Henderson as a result of the Liverpool skipper's recent dip in standards. However, Henderson's now experience and tournament know-how will be crucial, irrespective of how much he plays, so he would still get my vote to go to the Middle East. Famously, James Maddison has been overlooked by Southgate so much that it's almost a crime in 20 US states, but he has hit great form at just the right time for Leicester, and that will be firmly on the 52-year-old's mind. His creative spark and ability from set pieces could be a really dangerous weapon for the Three Lions, especially from off the bench, and in my opinion, it would be ridiculous not to include him. Yes, Mason Mount is one of the most divisive players in the Premier League for some strange reason, but he is definitely good enough to feature in Southgate's squad, and if England do decide to play with a formation that includes number 10, Mount would be a perfect man to fill that role. My reserves are Gallagher and James Ward-Prowse, the latter of whom I must admit is bitterly unfortunate to miss out. Now we move on to the wingers, and like I did with the central midfielders in some respects, I'm going to combine the right and left wingers into this segment. So the 5 I would pick are Phil Foden, Bukayo Saka, Raheem Sterling, Jack Grealish and Marcus Rashford. There is another caveat to this one in fairness, that being the news that Bukayo Saka has just picked up a ligament injury, although Mikel Arteta is optimistic that the 21-year-old will make it back in time for the tournament. If he doesn't make it back, then my replacement for him would be Harvey Elliott, who has been in stellar form for Liverpool this season, or throwing back in James Ward-Prowse and having another central midfielder in his place. But if he does, then of course Saka's going as one of England's most informed players right now, and he will be looking for redemption after his penalty miss at the Euro 2020 final. 3 of the others in my selection were put in without a second's hesitation. Phil Foden is one of England's best players right now and should start at the finals in Qatar. Raheem Sterling, in spite of his poor form at Chelsea, is one of England's most experienced heads and was the star man at Euro 2020, so it's undeniable that he's going. And Marcus Rashford has recovered from an admittedly poor 2021-22 season to start once again for Man United under Erik ten Hag. Whisper it quietly, but I would start Rashford over Sterling. The other slot in the squad was between Jack Grealish and Jadon Sancho, both players who have made big money moves to Manchester last summer, but have not been as good at their new clubs as they were at their previous clubs, I think it's fair to say. I think Sancho's drop-off in standards is actually quite sad, but age 22, there's still plenty of time for him to turn things around at Old Trafford, although I don't think it will happen over the coming couple of weeks. And as such, the former Dortmund star is just going to miss out to Grealish, who hasn't been amazing for Man City, but has by no means been awful either. Plus, his ability to win fouls seemingly at the press of a button may be quite useful. Those of you who have been keeping count will have noticed that there are 3 spots left in my squad, and those are going to be taken up by the strikers. And those 3 strikers are Harry Kane, Ivan Toney and Callum Wilson. There's no need to elaborate on Harry Kane really. He's England's talisman, captain, best player and most informed right now. Of course he's going. But choosing the strikers who could be Kane's deputies is a little bit trickier, as you could throw 5 names into the hat, namely Ivan Toney, Dominic Calvert-Lewin, Callum Wilson, Ollie Watkins and Tammy Abraham, and make very good cases for each of them going. Calvert-Lewin is phenomenal in the air and has returned to full fitness at just the right time. Watkins is really industrious and will cover a lot of ground to try to exploit any defensive tiredness late on in matches. Abraham, whilst not in exceptional form for Roma this season, most certainly has a lot of ability going for him. Wilson is flying for Newcastle and was the star of the show in their recent 4-0 win over Aston Villa, which Southgate I believe went to go and watch. And Toney is a great goal scorer and an expert at penalties, which could be crucial in the knockout stages, especially given England's notoriously patchy record at penalty shootouts. I think you could pick any of them and I wouldn't begrudge you for whichever ones you picked, but for me, I think it's difficult to overlook Toney right now, and Wilson's great form probably merits him a spot on the plane too, although how much he would play is up for debate. My reserve strikers would be Watkins and Abraham, with Calvert-Lewin unfortunate to miss out altogether. Now that you know my 26-man squad, who would be in my starting 11? Well, my formation would be a 5-2-2-1 or a 3-4-3 depending on how you view it, but with 2 wing-backs, 2 central midfielders and 2 wingers, plus a focal point up front. In goal, as mentioned earlier, I'd start Nick Pope. In defence, I'd go for Kieran Trippier, Kyle Walker, although if he's unfit I'd start Benjamin White instead, Eric Dyer, John Stones and Ben Chilwell. The 2 midfielders would obviously be Declan Rice and Jude Bellingham. The spots on the flanks would be taken up by Phil Foden and Marcus Rashford, and up front would be Sir Harold of Kane. But what do you guys think? Do you think I'm bang on with my selections? Are there some players you would change? Do you think I'm an idiot for including Harry Kane? Let me know what your squads would be and or any changes you would make to mine down in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, of course, please don't forget, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and you can ring the notification bell to be notified whenever I upload a video straight away. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, I'll see you then.